Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 227th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the sheikh who met As'ad smiled in his face and said to him, O my son, meseemeth thou art a stranger. And As'ad replied, Yes, I am a stranger. Then rejoined the old man, Verily, thou gladdenest our country with thy presence, O my son, and thou desolatest thine own land by reason of thine absence. What wantest thou of the market? Quoth As'ad, O uncle, I have a brother with whom I have come from a far land, and with whom I have journeyed these 3 months. And when we sighted this city, I left him, who is my elder brother, upon the mountain, and came hither, proposing to buy victuals, and what else, and return therewith to him, that we might feed thereon. Said the old man, Rejoice in all good, O my son, and know that thou today I give a marriage feast, to which I have bidden many guests, and I have made ready plenty of meats, the best and most delicious that heart can desire. So if thou wilt come with me to my place, I will give thee freely of all thou lackest, without asking thee a price or aught else. Moreover, I will teach thee the ways of this city, and praise be Allah, O my son, that I and none other have happened upon thee. As thou wilt, answered As'ad. Do as thou art disposed, but make haste, for indeed my brother awaiteth me, and his whole heart is with me. The old man took As'ad by the hand and carried him to a narrow lane, smiling in his face and saying, Glory be to him who hath delivered thee from the people of this city. And he ceased not walking till he entered a spacious house, wherein was a saloon. And behold, in the middle of it were 40 old men, well stricken in years, collected together and forming a single ring, as they sat around a lighted fire, to which they were doing worship and prostrating themselves. When As'ad saw this, he was confounded, and their every body stood on end, though he knew not what they were. And the sheikh said to them, O elders of the fire, how blessed is this day! And then he cried aloud, saying, Hello, Gazban! Whereupon there came out to them a tall, black slave of frightful aspect, grim-visaged and flat-nosed as an ape, who, when the old man made a sign to him, bent As'ad's arms behind his back and pinioned them. After which the sheikh said to them, Let him take him down to the vault unto the earth, and there leave him, and say to my slave girl, such an one, torture him night and day, and give him a cake of bread to eat morning and evening, against the time come to the voyage to the blue sea and the mountain of fire, whereon we will slaughter him as a sacrifice. So the black man carried him out to another door, and raising a flag in the floor, discovered a flight of 20 steps leading to a chamber under the earth, into which he descended with him, and laying his feet in irons, gave him over to the slave girl and went away. Meanwhile, the old men said to one another, When the day of the festival of fire come, we will sacrifice him on the mountain as a propitiatory offering, whereby we shall pleasure the fire. Presently the damsel went down to him, and beat him a grievous beating, till the streams of blood flowed from his sides, and he fainted. After which she set at his head a scone of bread and a cruse of brackish water, and went away and left him. In the middle of the night he revived, and found himself bound and beaten, and sore with beating. So he wept bitter tears, and recalling his former condition of honor and prosperity, lordship and dominion, and his separation from his sire, and his exile from his native land, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 228th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when As'ad found himself bound and beaten, and sore with beating, he recalled his wilsome condition of honor and prosperity, and dominion and lordship, and he wept, and groaned aloud, and recited these couplets. Stand by the ruined stead and ask of us, nor deem we dwell there as was state of us. The world, that partner hath departed us, yet sues not hateful hearts the fate of us. With whips, accursed slave girl scourges us, and teems her breast with rancorous hate of us. Allah shall haply deign to impart our lives, chastise our foes, and end this strait of us. And when As'ad had spoken his poetry, he put out his hand towards his head, and finding there the crust and the cruse full of brackish water, he ate a bitcock, just enough to keep life in him, and drank a little water, but could get no sleep till morning for the swarm of bugs and lice. As soon as it was day, the slave girl came down to him and changed his clothes, which were drenched with blood, and stuck to him so that his skin came off with the shirt. Wherefore he shrieked aloud and cried, Alas! O my God, if this be thy pleasure, increase it upon me. O Lord, verily thou art not mindful of him that oppresseth me. Do thou then avenge me upon him. And he groaned, and he repeated the following verses. Patient, O Allah, to thy destiny I bow. Suffice me what thou deem decree. Patient to bear thy will, O Lord of me. Patient to burn, O coals of Gaza-tree. They wrong me. Visit me with hurt and harm. Haply thy grace from them shall set me free. Far be it, O Lord, from thee to spare the wronger. O Lord of destiny, my hope in thee. And what another saith, Bethink thee not of worldly state. Leave everything of course to fate. For oft a thing that irketh thee shall in content eventuate, and oft what strait it still shall expand, and what expanded is waxed strait. Allah will do what wills his will, so be thou not importunate. But joy, the view of coming weal, shall make forget past bale and bait. And when he had ended his verse, the slave girl came down upon him with blows till he fainted again, and throwing him a flap of bread and a gugglet of saltish water, went away and left him sad and lonely, bound in chains of iron, with blood streaming from his side, and far from those he loved. So he wept and called to mind his brother and the honors he erst enjoyed. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 229th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that As'ad called to mind his brother, and the honors he erst enjoyed. So he wept and groaned and complained, and poured forth tears in floods, and improvised these verses. Easy, O fate, how long this wrong, this injury, robbing each morn and eve my brotherhood from me? Is not time now thou deem this length sufficiency of woes, and, O thou heart of rock, show clemency? My friends, thou wrongest when thou madest each enemy mock and exult me for thy wrongs, thy tyranny. My foeman's heart is solaced by the things he saw in me of strangerhood and lonely misery. Sufficeth thee not what came upon my head of dole, friends lost for evermore, eyes wan and pale of blee, but much in prison, cast so near there is not save hand to bite, with bitten hand for company, and tears that tempest down like goodly gift of cloud, and longing thirst whose fire weet no satiety. Regretful yearnings, singles, unceasing sighs, repine, remembrance and pain's very ecstasy. Desire I suffer sore and melancholy deep, and I must bide a prey to endless varancy. I find me ne'er a friend who looks with piteous eyes, and seeks my presence to allay my misery. Say, liveth any intimate with trusty love, who for mine ills will groan my sleepless malady, to whom moan I can make, and peradventure he shall pity eyes the sight of sleep can never see? The flea and bug suck up my blood as wit that drinks wine from the proffering hand of fair virginity. And may the lice my body I reminded me of orphans good in Kazi's claw of villainy. My home's a sepulchre that measures cubit 3, where pass I morn and eve in chained agony. My wines are tears, my clanks of chains make music stead. Care's my dessert of fruit, and sorrows are my bed. And when he had versed his verse and prosed his prose, he again groaned and complained, and remembered what he had been, and how he had been parted from his brother. Thus far concerning him, but as regards his brother Amjad, he awaited As'ad till midday, yet he returned not to him. Whereupon Amjad's vitals fluttered, the pangs of parting were sore upon him, and he poured forth abundant tears. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 230th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Amjad awaited his brother As'ad till midday, and he returned not to him, Amjad's vitals fluttered, the pangs of parting were sore upon him, and he poured forth abundant tears, exclaiming, Alas, my brother! Alas, my friend! Alas, my grief! How I feared we might be parted! Then he descended from the mountain top, with the tears running down his cheeks, and entering the city ceased not walking till he made the market. He asked the folk the name of the place, and concerning its people, and they said, This is the city of the Magians, and its citizens are mostly given to fire worshipping in lieu of the omnipotent king. Then he entered and inquired of the city of Empathy, and they answered, Of a truth, it is a year's journey thither by land, and 6 months by sea. It was governed erst by a king called Armanas, but he took to son-in-law and made king in his stead a prince called Kamar al-Zaman, distinguished for justice and munificence, equity and benevolence. When Amjad heard tell of his father, he groaned and wept and lamented, and knew not whither to go. However, he bought us something of food, and carried it to a retired spot, where he sat down thinking to eat. But recalling his brother, he fell a-weeping, and swallowed but a morsel to keep breath and body together, and that against his will. Then he rose and he walked about the city, seeking news of his brother, till he saw a Moslem tailor sitting in his shop. So he sat down by him and told him his story. Whereupon quoth the tailor, If he had fallen into the hands of the Magians, thou shalt hardly see him again. Yet it may be Allah will reunite you twain. But thou, O my brother, he continued, wilt thou lodge with me? Amjad answered, Yes. And the tailor rejoiced at this. So he abode with him many days, while the tailor comforted him and exhorted him to be patient, taught him tailoring till he became an expert in the craft. Now one day he went forth to the seashore and washed his clothes, after which he entered the bath and put on clean raiment. Then he walked about the city to divert himself with its sights, and presently there met him on the way a woman of passing beauty and loveliness, without peer for grace and comeliness. When she saw him, she raised her face veil, and signed to him by moving her eyebrows and her eyes with luring glances, and versified these couplets. I drooped my glance when seen thee on the way, as though, O slim waist, felled by the soul's hot ray. Thou art the fairest fair that e'er appeared, fairer today than fairer of yesterday. Were beauty parted, a fifth part of it, with Joseph for a part a fifth would stay. The rest would fly to thee, thine ownest own. Be every soul thy sacrifice, I pray. When Amjad heard these her words, they gladdened his heart, which inclined to her, and his bowels yearned towards her, and the hands of love sported with him. So he sighed to her in reply, and spoke these couplets. Above the rose of cheek is thorn of lance, who dareth pluck it rashest Cheviance. Stretch not thy hand towards it for night long, those lances marred because we snatched a glance. Say her, who tyrant is and tempter too, though justice might her tempting power enhance. Thy face would add to errors were it veiled. Unveiled, I see its guard hath best of chance. I cannot look upon soul's naked face, but can when mist cloud dims his countenance. The honey hive is held by honey bee, as the tribe guards what once their vigilance. And they would slay me. Let them in their ire, rancorous, and grant us freely to advance. They're not more murderous and change the whole than charging glance of her who wears the mole. And hearing these lines from Amjad, she sighed with the deepest sighs, and signing to him again, repeated these couplets. "'Tis thou hast trodden coyness path, not I. Grant me thy favours, for the time draws nigh. O thou who makest mourn with light of brow, and with loosed brow locks night in lift to sty. Thine idle aspect made of me thy slave, tempting as temptest me in days gone by, till just my liver fry with hottest love, who worship fire for God must fire abye. Thou sellest like of me for worthless price. If thou must sell, ask high of those who buy." When Amjad heard these her words, he said to her, "Wilt thou come to my lodging, or shall I go with thee to thine?" So she hung her head in shame to the ground, and repeated the words of him whose name be exalted. Men shall have preeminence above women because of those advantages wherein Allah hath caused the one of them to excel the other. Upon this, Amjad took the hint, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And now, when it was the 231st night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Amjad took the woman's hint, and understood that she wished to go with him whither he was going. He felt himself bounden to find a place wherein to receive her, but was ashamed to carry her to the house of his host the tailor. So he walked on, and she walked after him, and the two ceased not walking from street to street and place to place, till she was tired, and said to him, "O my lord, where is thy house?" Answered he, "But before us, just a little way." Then he turned aside into a handsome by-street, followed by the young woman, and walked on till he came to the end, where he found it was no thoroughfare, and exclaimed, "There is no majesty, and there is no might, save Allah, the glorious, the great." Then raising his eyes, he saw at the upper end of the lane a great door with 2 stone benches, but it was locked. So Amjad sat down on one of the benches, and she on the other, and she said to him, "O my lord, wherefore waitest thou?" He bowed his head a while to the ground, and then raised it, and answered, "I am waiting my Mameluke who hath the key, for I bade him make ready meat and drink and flowers to deck the wine service against my return from the bath." But he said to himself, "Haply the time will be tedious to her, and she will go about her business, leaving me here, when I will wend my own way." However, as soon as she was weary of long waiting, she said, "O my lord, thy Mameluke delayeth, and here we are sitting in the street." And she arose and took a stone and went up to the lock. Said Amjad, "Be not in haste, but have patience till the servant come." However, she hearkened not to him, but smote the wooden bolt with a stone and broke it in half, whereupon the door opened. Quoth he, "What possesseth thee to do this deed?" Quoth she, "Pooh, pooh, my lord, what mattereth it? Is not the house thy house and thy place?" He said, "There was no need to break the bolt." Then the damsel entered, to the confusion of Amjad, who knew not what to do for the fear of the people of the house. But she said to him, "Why dost thou not enter, O light of mine eyes and core of my heart?" Replied he, "I hear and obey, but my servant tarrieth long, and I know not if he have done aught of what I bade him, and especially enjoined upon him, or not." Hereupon he entered sore in fear of the people of the house, and found himself in a handsome saloon with 4 days recessed, each facing others, and containing closets and raised seats, all bespread with stuffs of silk and brocade, and in the midst was a jetting fountain of costly fashion, on whose margin rested a covered tray of meats, and a leather tablecloth hanging up, and gem-encrusted dishes full of fruits and sweet-scented flowers. Hard by stood drinking vessels, and a candlestick with a single wax candle therein, and the place was full of precious stuffs, and was ranged with chests and stools, and on each seat lay a parcel of clothes, upon which was a purse full of monies, gold and silver. The floor was paved with marble, and the house bore witness in every part of its owner's fortune. When Amjad saw this, he was confounded at his case, and said to himself, I am a lost man. Verily we are Allah's, and to Allah we are returning. As for the damsel, when she sighted the place, she rejoiced indeed with a joy nothing could exceed, and said to him, By Allah, O my lord, thy servant hath not failed of his duty, for see, he hath swept the place, and cooked the meat, and set on the fruit, and indeed I come at the best of times. But he paid no heed to her, his heart being taken up with fear of the housefolk. And she said, Fie, O my lord, O my heart, what aileth thee to stand thus? Then she sighed, and giving him a buss, which sounded like the cracking of a walnut, said, O my lord, and thou have made an appointment with other than me, I will gird my middle and serve her and thee. Amjad laughed with a heart full of rage and wrath, and came forwards and sat down panting, and saying to himself, Alack, mine ill death and doom when the owner of the place shall return. Then she seated herself by him, and fell to toying and laughing, while Amjad sat careful, frowning, thinking 1,000 thoughts, and communing with himself. Surely the master of the house cannot but come, and then what shall I say to him? He needs must kill me, and my life will be lost thus foolishly. Presently she rose, and tucking up her sleeves, took a tray of food on which she laid the cloth, and then set it before Amjad, and began to eat, saying, Eat, O my lord. So he came forward and ate, but the food was not pleasant to him. On the contrary, he ceased not to look towards the door till the damsel had eaten her full, when she took away the tray of the meats, and setting on the dessert, fell to eating of the dried fruits. Then she brought the wine service, and opening the jar, filled a cup, and handed it to Amjad, who took it from her hand, saying to himself, and well away when the master of the house cometh and seeth me. And he kept his eyes fixed on the threshold, even with the cup in his hand. While he was in this case, lo, in came the master of the house, who was a white slave, one of the chief men of the city, being the master of the horse to the king. He had fitted up this saloon for his pleasures, that he might make merry therein, and be private with whom he would. And he had that day bidden a youth whom he loved, and had made this entertainment for him. Now the name of this slave was Ba'adur, and he was open of hand, generous, munificent, and fain of almsgiving and charitable works. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my tale for the day, until it be morrow.